Have you ever felt a chill in your interactions, a subtle weight you can't explain, as if someone had entered your life and quietly shifted the atmosphere around you? Most people move through the world blind to this influence, assuming that the world is neutral, that intentions are always clear, that what they see is all there is. But there exists a type of presence so invisible, so precise, that it can bend your thoughts and emotions without leaving a single trace. They are the soulless, individuals who operate on a level of consciousness you rarely detect until it is almost too late. What if I told you that much of what you consider reality is a carefully constructed illusion, orchestrated by those who have mastered the art of manipulation not with words, but with the invisible architecture of your attention, your trust, your very energy? You cannot recognize them in a crowd, nor can you see the shadow they cast. And yet, their influence is profound, shaping your decisions, your fears, and even your sense of self. Today, we're going to uncover the mechanisms that these soulless individuals use, how they silently manipulate without detection, and most importantly, how you can awaken to their presence and reclaim the power that is inherently yours. To truly comprehend the methods of soulless people, you must first immerse yourself in the subtle dimensions where they operate. They do not announce themselves with force or spectacle, nor do they rely on overt aggression to bend reality to their will. Instead, they work in the shadows of perception, moving within the invisible architecture of your daily existence. Imagine a presence that does not need to shout, a force that does not need to strike, yet whose influence is undeniable. It is in this unseen territory, the silent, intangible spaces between thought and action, that their power thrives. Time itself becomes a malleable tool in their hands. They are attuned to the rhythm of your life, to the cadence of your choices, the subtle pauses when your attention drifts or your defenses falter. They know the exact moments when you are most susceptible, when fatigue clouds judgment, when longing softens resolve, when desire momentarily eclipses discernment. What may appear as chance encounters, casual comments, or minor interactions are, in fact, precisely orchestrated insertions. They do not rush, they wait. They exploit the intervals where your awareness is fractured, seamlessly guiding you toward outcomes that feel natural, inevitable even, while in truth, every step has been shaped by their quiet precision. Energy is another domain where their mastery is profound. Not the energy measured by the hours of a clock or the calories of a day, but the deeper currents of human vitality, attention, focus, emotional resonance. A simple gesture, a fleeting look, a carefully chosen word, these become tools of extraction and direction. They subtly siphon your energy, not through confrontation but through absorption, leaving your mind subtly unmoored, your emotional equilibrium gently shifted. You may feel drained, restless, or uncertain after interactions, never realizing that these sensations were orchestrated, a quiet rebalancing designed to tilt your perception without leaving a visible trace. Consider the layers of influence that exist beyond the obvious. Every conversation, every gesture, every moment carries a spectrum of potential outcomes. The soulless navigate these layers with the precision of a cartographer tracing invisible maps. They understand that human behavior is not merely reactive, but a complex network of emotional triggers, unconscious biases, and latent desires. By interacting with these hidden currents, they shape not only what you do, but how you feel about yourself, subtly adjusting your sense of reality, creating openings, nudging inclinations, and influencing judgments before you even recognize the shift. They thrive in liminal spaces, the thresholds of perception where reality feels uncertain, where instinct wavers, where certainty dissolves into doubt. These are the moments where influence is easiest to exert, where the mind becomes fertile ground for imperceptible reorientation. In these interstitial zones, they operate not as visible actors, but as architects of experience. Every emotion you feel, every fleeting doubt, every minor attraction to ideas or people, all of these can be influenced, guided, or reframed by their silent intervention. It is important to understand that their manipulation is not haphazard. It is deliberate, subtle, and deeply intelligent. They are attuned to the rhythm of your mental and emotional landscapes, able to insert themselves in ways that seem coincidental, even natural. The true genius of their approach lies in invisibility. While the world reacts to the loud, the dramatic, and the overt, they move in quiet spaces that are rarely observed, operating where others do not even think to look. They exploit the unnoticed, the ignored, the undervalued moments of life, bending them to create outcomes aligned with their intentions. And yet their influence is not merely external. By mirroring your own desires, fears, and internal patterns, they embed themselves within your subjective reality. You may perceive their guidance as your own insight, their suggestions as self-generated solutions. This is why their impact is so potent. They do not coerce, they do not threaten. They become intertwined with your consciousness, leaving you convinced that your choices are entirely your own. The manipulation is almost invisible because it feels familiar, aligned, intimate, even logical. To step into awareness of these mechanisms is to perceive the hidden dimensions of human interaction, the currents beneath conversation, the unspoken agreements beneath social engagement, the invisible patterns that structure perception. Once you begin to notice these subtle threads, the world itself shifts. The ordinary interactions that once seemed trivial are revealed as fields of influence, subtle arenas where attention, energy, and perception are continuously being tested, drawn, and occasionally redirected. Awareness does not remove the influence entirely, but it transforms it. What was once unseen becomes discernible, and discernment is the first step toward reclaiming authority over one's own reality. In this landscape, time, energy, and perception are instruments, and the soulless are virtuosos. Their mastery is not in physical power, but in the art of subtlety, in the delicate orchestration of human attention and intention. And while their methods are often invisible to the untrained eye, they leave traces, patterns, emotional dissonance, and the faint sense that something is amiss. The challenge and the opportunity lies in learning to perceive these currents, to trace the unseen lines of influence, and to awaken to the architecture of manipulation that surrounds the unwary. If you think manipulation is always loud, visible, or aggressive, you are already seeing only a fraction of the truth. The most insidious influence is not obvious. It is subtle, quiet, almost imperceptible, yet profoundly effective. Imagine being in a room where every sound, every shadow, every slight shift in light seems natural, and yet, the environment itself has been arranged to direct your focus, your mood, your choices, without a single word being spoken. This is the domain of the soulless, a realm where influence is invisible, and the architecture of your perception becomes their playground. You may have experienced it without realizing it. A fleeting doubt arises out of nowhere, a sudden hesitation, a shift in your desires that seems inexplicable. You feel drawn towards someone or repelled without understanding why. Decisions that you believed were spontaneous now appear to have been guided by forces you cannot name. What you consider intuition may, in fact, have been a subtle suggestion, delivered in imperceptible layers, bending your thoughts and emotions like a gentle but unyielding wind. The unsettling truth is that these influences are not random. They are calculated. The soulless do not simply react to you, they anticipate you. They understand the intricate patterns of human thought and behavior, the triggers that govern attention, emotion, and belief. They recognize the moments when you are most vulnerable, when longing clouds judgment, when fear silences your inner voice, when curiosity nudges you to take the first step toward an unseen trap. In these moments, their influence becomes almost magical, invisible, precise, and devastatingly effective. Have you ever trusted someone, only to later question the trust itself? Have you made a choice and afterward felt as if the decision was not entirely your own, as though some unseen hand had guided you along a path you did not consciously choose? This is not imagination, it is the subtle choreography of the soulless. They embed themselves in the very fabric of your experience, aligning with your desires and fears, becoming a mirror of your own mind. They gain influence not by confrontation, but by becoming familiar, comfortable, and seemingly aligned with your inner world. And yet, the most disorienting aspect is how difficult it is to detect. The manipulation is seamless because it often feels like your own insight. You do not recognize the subtle shifts because they follow the logic of your own thought patterns. They insert themselves into the rhythm of your life so precisely that awareness itself becomes uncertain. Moments that feel ordinary are often the very ones that carry the heaviest influence. The soulless operate in these spaces, the in-between moments, the gaps in perception, the fleeting pauses in your awareness. It is in these interstices that the mind becomes pliable, susceptible to subtle nudges that redirect choices, emotions, and beliefs. They do not need force because the mind is already malleable. They only need to gently guide, to whisper suggestion through invisible channels, to shape the contours of thought until what is artificial appears natural. Every interaction becomes a microcosm of influence. Every encounter a carefully tuned experiment in perception. Perhaps the most unsettling truth is how closely their method mirrors your own consciousness. They reflect your desires, your instincts, your moral compass, and in doing so, create a sense of alignment that feels intimate and authentic. You are rarely aware of the guidance because it resonates with your own tendencies. The very mechanisms that make you human, empathy, curiosity, trust, become the instruments through which your autonomy is quietly compromised. And yet, this is also where the seed of empowerment lies. Awareness of these subtle currents transforms the experience entirely. Once you perceive the invisible hand, the world shifts. The moments that once left you confused or manipulated reveal their structure, and with recognition comes the ability to reclaim the flow of your own consciousness. The manipulations that were previously seamless now become visible, tangible, and ultimately surmountable. In this strange, almost hypnotic space between influence and awareness, the mind is tested. The ordinary becomes extraordinary, the familiar becomes uncanny, and the choice emerges to remain in the shadow of influence, guided by forces you cannot perceive, or to awaken to the architecture of manipulation and reclaim the sovereignty of your own attention, intention, and energy. The invisible hand guides you in ways you cannot yet name, yet the very act of observing it begins to dissolve its power. Awareness is the first light that penetrates the shadow. And as that light grows, the subtle, quiet manipulations, the carefully placed suggestions, the micro-emotions, the hidden alignments start to lose their hold. The mind that once drifted along invisible currents can now begin to navigate with clarity, reclaiming the space that is inherently its own. To truly understand the power of the soulless, one must look beyond the surface of human behavior and enter the invisible architecture of consciousness itself. Most of what we consider reality is filtered through perception, layered with belief, memory, and instinct. The soulless do not confront the surface, they bypass it. They operate within the hidden networks of attention, subtle emotion, and energy flow, shaping what we experience before we even recognize it as our own. Their mastery lies not in domination, but in alignment with the unconscious patterns that already exist within us. Imagine a mind as a landscape, hills of desire, valleys of doubt, rivers of instinct, forests of memory. A typical person walks this landscape unaware, reacting to stimuli, making decisions they believe are independent. The soulless move through this terrain like cartographers who have memorized every path, every slope, every hidden channel. They do not bulldoze or force, they guide. With a glance, a word, a micro-expression, they shift your attention, redirect your thought, alter your emotional state, and subtly reroute the course of your decisions. You feel as though you are free, as though your choices are self-generated, yet the architecture itself has already been bent to their design. They are masters of reflection. They mirror your values, your desires, even your fears, and in doing so, create the illusion of alignment. Trust emerges not because it is earned, but because it feels familiar. Decisions feel authentic, moral judgments feel aligned with your own compass, and yet each of these moments has been quietly orchestrated. You may believe you are exercising freedom, but freedom itself has been carefully choreographed, framed by an influence you can barely perceive. The methods they employ are multifaceted, precise, and almost surgical in nature. They are not brute force. They are the art of suggestion refined to its purest form. Subtle emotional contagion, a fleeting doubt, a slight unease, a gentle nudge of longing accumulates over time, reshaping your internal state. Micro moments of attention are diverted, filtered, and amplified to guide perception. Even the flow of information you receive is not accidental. It is curated to create openings, to validate certain beliefs while quietly undermining others. Each interaction, each encounter, each word exchanged becomes a channel of influence, an invisible thread that pulls toward outcomes designed in silence. Yet perhaps the most profound element of their power is the way they interact with consciousness itself. Human perception is not linear. It is a web of triggers, associations, and patterns. The soulless intuitively navigate this web. They know which strands of attention to touch, which threads of emotion to activate, and which currents of thought to follow, bending the very perception of reality without confrontation. They operate like unseen conductors, orchestrating a symphony in which you are both participant and instrument, believing that every note arises spontaneously from your own choice. And here lies the central revelation. Their influence is not merely external. It is embedded within the structure of your experience. They manipulate the very lens through which you perceive reality. By shaping attention, emotion, and expectation, they reshape not only your decisions but your sense of self. Confidence, doubt, desire, moral clarity, curiosity, all can be subtly redirected, redefined, or suspended. The mind that believes it is sovereign is in fact navigating a landscape already reshaped by invisible hands. This is why their impact is so difficult to detect. Logic, reasoning, and conscious vigilance are often insufficient because the mechanisms of influence operate below the threshold of deliberate thought. They target the spaces between thinking, the moments between intuition and action, the gaps where perception flows unguarded. In these gaps, subtle gestures, timing, alignment, and mirroring become instruments of profound manipulation. You cannot see them because they exist in the negative spaces of consciousness. The moments you assume are spontaneous, the micro-decisions you assume are independent, the feelings you assume are authentic, but awareness changes everything. Once you begin to perceive these currents, the invisible architecture becomes visible. The very elements that were once manipulated, attention, perception, energy, can now be reclaimed. Understanding the methods of the soulless is not merely academic, it is transformational. It allows you to recognize alignment that is false, trust that is engineered, and approval that is designed. Once recognized, these invisible influences lose their power, and the landscape of your mind becomes yours once again. In essence, the soulless reveal a profound truth about consciousness itself. Reality is not only external, it is constructed moment by perception, attention, and subtle alignment. Those who understand and manipulate these processes wield a silent authority that surpasses brute force. And those who awaken to these mechanisms, who recognize the invisible currents and reclaim their own attention, step into a sovereignty that is as deep as it is liberating. The mechanics of the soulless mind are not merely a study of manipulation. They are a mirror, reflecting the vulnerabilities, potentials, and untapped power within every human consciousness. Awareness of these mechanics is the threshold between being guided unknowingly and walking freely, fully conscious of the energies, patterns, and subtle influences that shape your world. In that threshold lies mastery, the ability not only to defend against manipulation, but to understand the deeper truths of perception, influence, and the mysterious architecture of reality itself. If you have ever walked away from an interaction feeling drained, unsettled, or strangely confused, you are not imagining it. Many of us have brushed against the presence of soulless people without realizing it, only noticing afterward the subtle shifts in mood, energy, and clarity. Perhaps you felt a lingering doubt, a hesitation that had no clear source, or a quiet erosion of confidence that seemed to happen gradually, almost imperceptibly. These experiences are real, and they leave marks deeper than mere memory, traces in your emotional and energetic body that can influence future decisions, erode trust, and leave you questioning your own instincts. You may have caught yourself replaying conversations, wondering why a particular interaction left you feeling off balance. You might have trusted someone too quickly, only to later sense that trust had been guided rather than earned. Or perhaps you felt the inexplicable pull to act or choose in a way that, at the time, seemed entirely natural, only to realize later that your autonomy had been quietly tested. These are not failures of judgment. They are the results of engagement with subtle, precise forms of influence that operate at a level beyond ordinary awareness. And yet, in these experiences lies the opportunity for profound awakening. Feeling the effect of manipulation is not a sign of weakness. It is evidence that you are human, sensitive, and deeply aware. It is a reminder that your mind and spirit are alive, capable of perception and resonance. Awareness, the simple act of noticing that something was influencing you without your full consent, is itself the first act of reclaiming power. By naming it, by observing the subtle drain or the faint sway, you begin to establish a boundary within your own consciousness, a line where influence can no longer operate unnoticed. This is a deeply human struggle, and it is universal. You are not alone. Everyone encounters energy, attention, and subtle influence in ways that test their awareness, yet few people are taught to recognize the signs. Perhaps you have felt isolated in this realization, as if you are the only one noticing the threads in the unseen tapestry. But the truth is that those who have the sensitivity to perceive these currents, who feel the whisper of influence in a glance, the pull in a conversation, the quiet redirection of attention, share a rare and vital consciousness. Your sensitivity is not a liability, it is your strength. It is in this recognition that intimacy arises, intimacy with yourself and with the deeper structures of life. You begin to see not only how you have been influenced, but also the subtle capacities within your own mind to reclaim awareness. Each hesitation, each flash of doubt, each moment of confusion can be transformed into a signal, a guidepost pointing you toward your own internal sovereignty. By observing how your energy and attention have been shaped, you gain insight into the mechanisms of consciousness itself, and with insight comes the potential for mastery. And so, the personal connection is not just a reassurance, it is a call to self-recognition. You are not an isolated observer of manipulation. You are a conscious being with the capacity to perceive, respond, and reclaim. Every subtle shift that once unsettled you can now become a doorway into understanding. Every drained encounter a lesson in discernment, and every manipulated thought a mirror reflecting the untapped power within you. You are being invited to look deeply at your own interactions, your patterns, and your responses, not in guilt or fear, but in recognition of your own inherent power. The moments in which you felt weakened were not failures. They were opportunities to awaken to the subtle architecture of influence, to recognize the invisible currents, and to step into the sovereignty that has always been yours. And as you begin to feel this recognition, a quiet transformation occurs. You no longer experience the world merely as a landscape of events and personalities. You begin to see it as a network of energy, intention, and perception. A living field in which you are an active participant, no longer a passive subject. You become aware that the very forces that once moved you invisibly can now be perceived, understood, and ultimately guided by your own consciousness. This is the essence of the personal connection. To understand that you are not alone in your awareness, that your sensitivity is a gift, and that through observation, discernment, and recognition, the subtle influences that once held sway can now become instruments of your own awakening. In acknowledging the presence of soulless manipulation, you do not merely defend against it. You illuminate the hidden structures of life itself, and reclaim the integrity of your own mind, your own energy, and your own spirit. In this space, you find intimacy with yourself, a profound trust in your perception, and the dawning awareness that the sovereignty of consciousness is never lost. It only waits to be recognized, cultivated, and embraced. The awareness you have gained is not merely a thought or an insight, it is an invitation. It is the threshold between being subtly guided by external currents and standing fully sovereign within your own consciousness. The moments in which you have felt manipulated, drained, or unsettled were never failures. They were signals, gentle alarms from your deeper self, indicating that a field of unseen influence had been at play. Recognition is the first step. The next is intentional action, quiet, deliberate, and mystical in nature. Awakening begins with observation. Notice the subtle shifts in energy that occur during interactions. Observe the fleeting emotions, the micro-doubts, the small impulses that arise seemingly out of nowhere. Ask yourself, which of these are truly mine and which have been suggested, nudged, or reflected back to me by another? This is not an intellectual exercise, it is an internal calibration, a tuning of perception, so that you may discern the subtle currents that move around and through you. From this awareness emerges discernment. Once you can recognize the invisible hand, you can choose not to follow it unconsciously. You can hold your attention, redirect your focus, and reclaim the autonomy of thought. Discernment is the act of separating your own energy from the energy of those who operate without a soul. It is the quiet but profound realization that while external influence exists, it cannot penetrate the fortified clarity of conscious awareness. You are no longer a passive participant in the subtle architecture of manipulation. You are now an observer, a participant, and ultimately a guide of your own inner landscape. Energy management becomes the next frontier. Soulless individuals feed on attention, vitality, and unguarded awareness. To awaken is to protect these reserves, to move with intention, to recognize when energy is being quietly extracted, and to learn to replenish it. This requires mindfulness, presence, and a delicate balance of engagement and detachment. It is not about avoidance or fear. It is about cultivating an inner reservoir of clarity and strength that allows you to move through the world without being invisibly drained. There is also a mystical aspect to this awakening. Awareness itself is not merely defensive, it is transformative. The act of perceiving influence in its subtle forms shifts the very fabric of reality you experience. Your consciousness begins to operate as a filter, separating truth from suggestion, your own energy from that of others, genuine alignment from engineered alignment. What was once invisible becomes illuminated. What was once subtle manipulation becomes a mirror reflecting your own latent power. You are no longer bound by the currents you once could not see. You are now capable of navigating them with awareness, precision, and even grace. Action in this awakened state is not dramatic. It is not confrontation or aggression. It is an inner alignment that manifests outwardly. It is the choice to engage only from clarity, to direct attention consciously, and to respond rather than react. Each decision becomes an affirmation of sovereignty, each interaction a reinforcement of inner authority, each moment of presence a reclaiming of energy that was previously diffuse or diverted. And most profoundly, awakening reconnects you to your own deeper essence. The mind, which was once pliable and subtly guided, now becomes an instrument of intentional awareness. The heart, which may have been unknowingly drained, now pulses with renewed vitality. The spirit, which may have felt fragmented or influenced, begins to assert its inherent sovereignty. You are not merely defending against manipulation, you are stepping into a fuller expression of consciousness, a self-directed flow of awareness that shapes reality from the inside out. This is the essence of the call to awakening, a quiet, mystical, and radical reclaiming of self. It is the realization that the power to perceive, discern, and navigate the subtle currents of influence has always been yours. It is an inward turning, a luminous alignment with your own consciousness, a transformation of the very architecture of attention and energy. By awakening, you do not merely survive the world of soulless manipulation, you transcend it, becoming a conscious force in your own life, capable of perceiving, guiding, and shaping with clarity and integrity. Awakening is subtle, continuous, and profound. It is not a single act, but a series of conscious choices that collectively reclaim your sovereignty. With each moment of awareness, each act of discernment, each intentional focus of energy, you step further into mastery. Not mastery over others, but mastery over your own perception, your own attention, and your own reality. It is a reclaiming of what was always inherently yours. The power to navigate life with clarity, presence, and a profound sense of inner authority. Once you have seen the unseen, the landscape of reality transforms. The subtle currents that once guided you invisibly, shaping your decisions, emotions, and energy, no longer hold dominion over your perception. The shadows that once felt dense, purposeful, and formidable reveal themselves as hollow projections, empty echoes cast by those who never truly possessed the light you carry within. What was once a maze of uncertainty now appears as a field of energy, patterned but perceptible, navigable, and ultimately yours to traverse. The awakening is not an end, nor is it a final act of confrontation. It is a return, a quiet, luminous return to the sovereignty of your own consciousness. The world has not changed, but the way you inhabit it has. Each interaction, each glance, each word exchanged is now filtered through the clarity of awareness. Influence that was once invisible is now illuminated. Energy that was once drained without notice is now guarded, understood, and harmonized. Perception, once pliable and unknowingly directed, has become sharp, precise, and sovereign. And yet, this is not a triumph of force, but of recognition. You have not conquered others, you have recognized yourself. You have traced the invisible architecture of influence, and in doing so, discovered the architecture of your own mind, the hidden corridors of your own attention, the subtle currents of your own energy. You realize that the power you once sought externally was always inside, dormant, waiting for the light of awareness to awaken it. In this light, you understand the true nature of the world around you. The soulless, who once seemed capable of quiet domination, now appear as reflections of patterns that you have the ability to recognize and transform. The subtle manipulations that once left you questioning your intuition and judgment are now perceived as signals, guideposts, and mirrors, each pointing toward your own inner strength. The very forces that once moved unseen are now part of the map you navigate consciously. The return to light is also a return to the rhythm of life itself. Time, attention, and energy, once quietly manipulated, now flow according to your awareness, creating a harmony between perception and reality. You step into the world fully, no longer a passive participant in hidden designs, but an active, conscious presence. The energy you direct, the focus you choose, the decisions you make, all are anchored in clarity and sovereign attention. The shadows around you no longer carry power over your mind, for the light of awareness within you illuminates all spaces, subtle and hidden alike. And in the quietude that follows recognition, you sense the vastness of your own being. Influence, manipulation, and energy currents continue to exist, but they exist in relation to your awareness, not in control of it. The subtle landscape of human interaction, once confusing and disorienting, now becomes a field for mastery, reflection, and conscious choice. The invisible forces of the world have not disappeared. They have simply revealed their true nature, patterns of energy, intention, and attention that you now perceive and navigate with sovereign clarity. Finally, in this luminous return, you realize the most profound truth. The power was never elsewhere. It was never external. It was always within you. Every doubt, every hesitation, every fleeting influence was a reminder of the sovereignty that was waiting to be recognized. You are not merely awake. You are luminous, present, and deeply aligned with the architecture of your own mind, energy, and spirit. The shadows that once seemed formidable dissolve in the light of awareness, leaving a space of clarity, inner authority, and mystical sovereignty that belongs solely to you. The journey concludes, not with an ending, but with the quiet assurance of inner freedom. You walk forward, fully conscious, aware of the invisible currents, and at the same time, unbound by them. In the stillness of perception, in the light of recognition, and in the reclaimed flow of energy, the world is once again revealed, not as a place of unseen manipulation, but as a living field in which your consciousness shapes reality with clarity, presence, and quiet mastery. And in that awareness you understand, the invisible hands may always exist, but they no longer move you. You are sovereign, you are awake, you are luminous.